Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to another fi360 Toolkit webinar. Today we will be talking a little bit about the fi360 Toolkit, how you can get started using the toolkit, and some of the tricks and tips of moving around the toolkit. My name is Mike Limbacher. I work with the fi360 Toolkit here at fi360, and we will be going through the toolkit. We'll go through some of the main areas that you'll use as a toolkit user, and we'll kind of cover a lot of different features of the toolkit. We won't go into too much detail, but we will kind of cover a lot of the different areas that you'll need to know about when you jump into the toolkit for the very first time. As we get through the toolkit here today, if you do have any questions, there's a GoToWebinar panel that you have open. If you have any questions, feel free to type in the questions, and I'll try and answer them as we go along. If I seem to be ignoring you, it's not on purpose. I'm just moving through, and I'll definitely stop and answer any questions that you have as we follow up today. So feel free to type anything in as we move along, and we'll kind of go through along those lines. So let's get started, and let's take a look at the fi360 Toolkit. The first thing that hopefully everyone sees is my screen. And we have a few areas up on the toolkit here that we're going to jump into today. But obviously the fi360 Toolkit as a whole is a web-based solution, so there's nothing for you to download, upload, monitor. Everything is really at your fingertips as soon as you log into the toolkit. So with that being said, there are several specific features of the tool that are available, and they work together. So as we hopefully see going through, we'll go into the analyzer, we'll go into the My Client area, we'll go into the proposal generator, but we'll see how some of these features kind of interact with each other and how you may be able to use them in conjunction. So these main icons that you see up on the page, the pie chart, the magnifying glass, they also represent all these different areas along the top page here that are available to you. So depending on your subscription, you should definitely see a section for clients, for proposals, if you have the Platinum version, the list area, models, individual tools, some settings that are available, and then our Help Center. Definitely take a check into the Help Center either before or after you jump into the toolkit. A lot of great information in here, starting off with the fiduciary score methodology, some different guides. We have a bunch of different tutorials and webinars that will help you through the toolkit. We'll be updating this Getting Started Toolkit webinar here today, so hopefully we'll be able to get that updated for you. But then, again, feel free to use that Help Center and then send any questions that you have along the way to tools@fi360.com, and we'll be able to help you out. All right, let's jump into the toolkit. The three main areas that I want to cover today are one, the investment analyzer. We'll go in there, talk a little bit about the data in the toolkit and how you can perform a search in the toolkit to find an investment. And we'll talk a little bit about the fi360 fiduciary score. Next, we'll jump into the client area, and this is where we'll create a client in the system. We'll develop their investment policy statement. We'll load the holdings for that client into the toolkit, and then we'll produce reports to review the watch list decisions that are being made for the client. Finally, we'll touch on the proposal generator, go into the proposal and build a proposal report, help you win new sales, help you win changes for an existing client. So reallocating a portfolio for a client, readjusting a 401k lineup, you can use the proposal generator for that. And then finally, we'll not necessarily touch on settings, but we'll touch on some of the features within the settings that help you to kind of manage all this information globally. There's some global reporting that we'll briefly go to, and the watch list area to help you manage all your watch list decisions from a global perspective. So let's jump into the analyzer, where we can begin our searching and screening process and really start to think about some of the data and how it can be used in the toolkit. So on this page here, there's a few things going on, but really this page boils down to research. And what we have on the left side of the page are all the different search options that we have. And before we get into the details here, I wanted to bring your attention over to the far right side of the page. And in this drop-down that I just brought up, we can see that there's a couple different options. One is mutual funds and ETFs, another separate accounts, which are separate accounts for high net worth individuals or DB plans. Then we have annuities for variable annuity sub-accounts. And then finally, for those of you in the 401k space, we have what's called the GRPA, Group Retirement Plan Annuities. These are the investment options available from different insurance companies. In addition to that, we also have the time period that we can change and switch between the current time period, which for my account is July 31st. For other people, it may be June 30th. You can actually change the data in the system, and you could subscribe to a monthly feed or a quarterly feed, which is the default. So nice feature to have if you want to get more timely data. But again, we're going to stick with the most recent data period now. And so those are two of the options that we have here, and we're just going to stick with the mutual fund universe and the current data period. But if you wanted to switch those around, you can. And then you can start into your search. And one more thing that I forgot to mention, all the underlying data that we have, we pull in from Morningstar. And we do that on, again, a monthly basis for that monthly feed. But whether you're on the monthly data feed or the quarterly data feed, you'll see the data pulled into the system about 6 business days after the end of each month. All right, back to the task at hand. We're in search mode here, and we can use all these different options on the left side of the page for our searching and screening. So some of the simple ones, ticker symbol, fund name, those are pretty obvious. You can type in a ticker or a fund name and add that over and find a particular investment that you want. But again, the main way that people like to use this is using all these other options, using the peer group, perhaps fund family name, the fiduciary score, which we'll touch on, performance factors, risk factors, expenses, operations, share class, to narrow this list of 25,000 funds down to something a little more meaningful and manageable. And really the first step for some people, it actually may be scrolling all the way down to the bottom and looking at this broker availability screen. So these are different platforms that we pull in from Morningstar, which you can search and screen on, or this custom fund universe. And this custom fund universe, again, you can think of as a platform that you can build and load into the system. There's an option over on the right-hand side to access that custom universe. You can also jump into it from My List. But this custom universe is helpful because this gives you the ability to build a list, 100 funds, 10,000 funds. You can build your own platform, something like Paychex or Fidelity, and then you can load that into the system. So let's see what we get with Fidelity. So as we add this over, well, 294. So this is a small universe, but we have this list now, and we know that we've loaded this list into the system, and these 294 funds are the subset of data that we want to search on, whether it's a platform for our client or we just know that this is a subset of funds that we want to search on. So now we can scroll up to the top, and we can start to add some other factors. So peer groups, for example, maybe we're searching for a small cap fund. Maybe you want to add over a small cap blend. Maybe you want to add over growth and value as well. We can add over the fi360 fiduciary score. Let's add that over. And then let's add over 5-year return as well. So as we add over a couple of these factors, we can also change the threshold by clicking on the drop-down and changing the threshold. Let's change it. And now we have 3 funds. Let's actually bump that up a little bit and give ourselves something to work with, 7 funds there. So we can change that threshold for many of these factors to change the results and get a more meaningful number of funds out of the search process. With the fiduciary score, again, we'll jump into it a little bit more, but the lower the number, the better. So we want funds in the less than or equal to 25, essentially funds in the top quartile for the fiduciary score. So with all that searching and screening, we now have 7 results, and we can click on View Results and find out what we have. So whether this is 70 funds, 7 funds like we have here, or maybe 170 funds, we'll be able to get that search result and have a little bit of fun searching around in the data now. So again, I just have a small subset here, but you can click on the column headers to sort the information. You can click on these hide links to remove the columns and add other columns into the search process if you want to. But really what most people like to do once they get to this page is begin to produce some reports. So we're going to do just that, and we can use the checkboxes to select individual funds that we want to run a report for, or we can actually run a report on all 7 funds. And the option to choose either way is all embedded in this Produce Reports area that we're going to open up right now. And the default select investments only. So I'm going to run an investment profile report on those 7 individual funds, or those 3 individual funds, excuse me, that I selected. But then I can also switch this over to all investments, and I'm going to run a snapshot report on all of those 7 reports right now. So anytime you click this PDF link, this is going to bring up a PDF report, and it's going to send that report to our queue, where we're actually going to generate the report. Depending on the size of the report and how long and how many investments that you have in it, could take 20 seconds, could take 30 or 40 seconds, just depends on how big the report is. But you see that the report queue stops spinning, and now we have our reports in. And as I open this up, I only produced 2 reports, but I actually have a whole bunch of different reports listed here that I ran earlier today. So all these reports will collect in here throughout the day. If you know you ran a report earlier today, instead of actually running the report, you can just jump into the queue and pull it up. But once the day ends, this queue will clear out, and you'll have a brand new queue starting tomorrow. So what we can do is open up this profile report and jump into it. And then also, again, just like any other PDF that you might encounter, you can save this, store this to your desktop, email it to a client or a colleague, and really have full access to the report, whatever you need to do with it. Now, I'm scrolling through this pretty quickly because I want to get to the actual meat of the report. But those sections that I scrolled past are part of the default report. We'll touch on how you can customize the report in a few moments, but I just want to get to the heart of the report right now. And this is it. This is the actual profile for this individual investment, this Hartford Small Cap Growth R5 share. And this upper half of the report, as I kind of scroll up and down a little bit, really focuses on the fi360 fiduciary score. So in this upper left-hand corner, we have the fiduciary score, and then we also have the 1-year average, the 3-year average, and then if the fund has enough history, a 5- and 10-year average as well. So as we look at this individual fund here, we see it as a score of 0. And with the fiduciary score, that's actually the best score that you can receive. That means that it's passed all 11 factors and thresholds. So we can see all these green check marks across the bottom here underneath our bar charts, and around the side here we see these green check marks. So we can see that this investment has passed the fi360 fiduciary score process. Let's take a look at another fund here. Yep, that one passed too. So let's find one that didn't pass. This Nuveen has a shortfall. So this is a good one to look at, and we can see here that the style consistency is not right. So that's where the fund had a shortfall in style consistency. Other things that we look at are composition, the inception date, net assets, manager tenure, and then these items in the bar charts with our peer group analysis too. The expense ratio, alpha, Sharpe, and then the 1, 3, 5-year return. So those are all the items that we look at. What we look at are certain thresholds or tests that the investment needs to meet. So in this example here, we look at the Morningstar style box and compare it to the peer group. This fund in particular is in the small blend peer group, but for this current period, the fund drifted over small value. So that's the threshold that the fund didn't pass. So based on that shortfall, we're going to award the fund points. If there was another shortfall, say in net assets, then we would mark more points into the fiduciary score process. So what we do is, if there's more than one failure, then we add up those points, and then that point total is used to rank the fund within the peer group. So this 23 indicates that the fund is in the 23rd percentile of its peer group small blend. So this is, again, the ranking process that we go through. Again, in that Help Center, those are complete methodology document that gives you a little bit more detail than what I covered today, and I encourage you to jump in and take a glance at that if you have any more questions on the fiduciary score. And as you're running through that, what I encourage you to do is pull up a fund profile report on one of your favorite funds, and again, go through the process of kind of seeing which items passed and which items failed, if any, for the fund that you're going through. So that's the fiduciary score. Again, these averages are also calculated based on the history of the fiduciary score. So if you want to get a sense of what's going on with that, we can scroll to the second page of this profile. And if we're looking from right to left, we can go back a year, we can go back 3 years, we can go back 5 years. And if we pull out our calculator and average that data together, which actually is a little more complex than that, but really it's just an average of those data points going back 1, 3, 5, or 10 years. So really just the history of the fund, and we can see what's going on with the fund over time is a great value to this individual profile. So with all that time you might have we spent in this profile and on the fiduciary score, you might have asked, well, are there any other sections, and are there any other reports? And there mostly are other sections and reports that we can build into our reporting options in the toolkit. One other such example is the snapshot report. And again, this is just a brief flavor of some of the sections that we have. Again, I'm going to scroll past the standardized performance and the cover page and just get into the report for now. And as we look at this snapshot, this is just a more condensed and more compact review of the investments. And again, we're looking at all 7 investments in our search process now, but we kind of scroll across the one individual fund. We see what's going on with that individual fund. We see the fiduciary score. We see some helpful information on the expense ratio, and then some of the different returns as well. So depending on the number of funds that you want to examine and the depth of the research that you want to examine, there may be a fund profile that you run, there may be a snapshot report that you run. Also encourage you to take a look at the comparison report when you get a chance. That's kind of in between, where it's going to give you more compact detail, but a lot more information than the snapshot. So a couple different levels of information for you to look at on this page. And just keep in mind, anytime you see data on a page, you'll be able to run a report, any of these reports, and have this option to run reports and review data in the toolkit. All right, so that's the analyzer and the fiduciary score. And looking at the fiduciary score again, if you kind of conceptualize it overall as a process, really it's the due diligence process that investment fiduciary needs to be looking at. So we've developed our fiduciary score process to be that independent due diligence process. If you really haven't developed one before, you can certainly start to use that kind of off the shelf and really have a sound due diligence process as you work as an investment fiduciary. Now, if you've already created a process or you're working with a particular client that has built their own process, what we can do is in the platinum version of the toolkit, we can go into the user settings area and build our own custom due diligence process. And as we build this process in the toolkit, once we jump into the clients, we'll really see where this process comes into play as we work through the client area, which we'll jump into in just a moment here. All right, apologize for that. Sometimes the internet gets a little wacky here. But here we go. We're on the due diligence page, and not much to look at here. But again, driving home the concept of due diligence, it's really the options that are available to you. So as we jump into the client, we'll see this same list of criteria along the left-hand side here, the fiduciary score, and then these new options that I've built into my version of the toolkit. And what it really comes down to is what you want to do. So you may create custom due diligence that's just changing the threshold. So our default is less than or equal to 25. Maybe you want to pump it up to 30 or 50. Maybe you just want to use our fiduciary score and build custom due diligence criteria that changes the threshold. That's an option for you. But again, if you're working with a client that they've built their own custom process, this MDC is a good example. And what we have here are, again, those same options that you saw in the investment analyzer. We can select the options from the left side, move them over to the right side, and we're building a custom process now. So my custom process happens to include the fiduciary score, but your custom process may not. I've selected the factors I want. I've selected the thresholds I want, and then I can click Save and store that in the system. And then there are other ways that I can customize this. I can actually look at these factors and thresholds historically over a period of time. I can designate them to be required or optional. And with those optional factors, I can select how many of those optional factors I want for the investment process to meet a fiduciary test. And really, I can add some customization and flexibility into the process other than just selecting the factors and thresholds. The section that I do that is in this level of importance area. And here, again, I just have a few simple selections, but number of periods to evaluate. Again, I can go back over different months or different periods if I'm using quarterly data or monthly data, and go back over different time periods to create a historical view of the due diligence criteria. If I've selected some factors to be optional, I can select the number of factors that I want to be optional, how many need to be met before the due diligence set fails, and then missing data. And in this example, this is a good example, the 10-year return. Not every investment is going to have a 10-year return just simply because not every investment has been around for 10 years yet. So what you may want to do is flag that as pass. So in our due diligence process, instead of automatically failing that investment, it's going to skip over that and not count that as a shortfall, if you will, in the custom process. So really building and customizing that is a nice option and nice feature in the toolkit. All right, we're going to go into the client area now, and we're going to build a client, and we're going to start to build that IPS and think about where that due diligence starts to come into play for that individual client. Now, this client area that we came into is where all your clients are going to be stored. And before we have a whole list of clients in the system, we need to create a new client. And to do that, we just click on the Create button on the right side of the page. And then there are a few fields that we need to enter before we can start to work with client data. But they're pretty simple. Client name, client status, which is just a filing mechanism. But then the type and subtype are pretty important. We've built the toolkit to work with all different client types, not just 401k plans, not just individual clients. We're really building that toolkit to give you the ability to create a sound fiduciary process and use it across all different client types if you work with different client sets. So whether it's committee-directed DB plan or participant-directed 401k, foundation, individual, or personal trust, you can build that client in the system and use that same fiduciary process. So whether you're selecting the type and then the subtype, these two options are going to help to drive some of the questions that you see. In particular, it's going to drive the type of IPS that you create, and it's also going to drive some of the report options that you see as well. So it's important to make that that client type selection when you're building the client. And then custom universe, that same custom universe that we use to help narrow down our search in the investment analyzer, we can apply that custom universe to the client here. And I won't do it now, but we'll talk about where that comes into play when we get into fees and expenses in our client. So I'm just going to pull up an example that we have in the system already. And we'll go into this client here, and let me just clear up a few things in here. But what we're seeing on this page here is the history of the client. Now, don't take too much pay too much attention to these values that you see because they've changed a little bit here. This is more of a test client than anything else. But hopefully what you're seeing here are a couple different things. So one is we have history for this client. So going back over these different data periods, we have history. And what that means is we can track the number of investments and the changes in investments over time. We track the change in plan or portfolio value over time. And then it's not inherent on this page, but we're also tracking and managing the watch list decisions that are being made for the clients over time. So as you build the client history in the system, you'll be able to generate trending reports that show watch list decisions, a history of those watch list decisions, a history of this other investment data that's valuable for decision-making processes. And then another just kind of benefit is the ability to really run a historical report. So again, if you haven't built the history in the toolkit yet, you can create a historical data period and say you want to run a report for a client for 2009. You can jump in here, enter the lineup as of that data period, and run a report that will be accurate as of 2009. So a great way to build the history into the system, or just generate historical client reports in the toolkit. Now, with all that being said, 9 times out of 10, you're just going to jump in here and jump into the most recent data period, which, again, for me is July 31st. And then what we're going to do here is kind of go through this as if this was a brand new client. But keep in mind, as we jump through these different sections, we may not need to jump into these sections every single time we jump into the client. So we'll jump into the IPS, the holdings, expenses, and then reports. But really on a day-by-day or month-by-month or quarter-by-quarter basis, you may not jump into the IPS all that often. You may not jump into the expenses all that often, just on a periodic review of these areas as we jump through. So let's take a look at the IPS first. And as we look at this IPS again, keep in mind that this is being driven by the client type that we've selected. So since we're working with a 401k plan, we have questions about 404C safe harbor for participant education, the QDIA option for the plan, and participant advice. Are we providing those different alternatives in our 401k? Different options down below. Again, for a 401k, we have the investment lineup in terms of asset classes. If this was an individual, you'd be defining the strategic allocation for the client. If we're looking at some miscellaneous information, there'll be options listed over here as to what different investment types are being used. Are you using socially and environmentally responsible investing options? And then back to our old favorites, the due diligence criteria. So what are you using in the investment selection process when you're jumping into the analyzer to make a new investment option decision? What are you using for the ongoing monitoring criteria to help make decisions for your watch list and potential replacement options? So again, that default of the fi360 fiduciary score or your own custom due diligence criteria really comes into play here. And again, we have 2 different options here. We typically recommend that you keep them the same, but some people like to have perhaps a more stringent criteria for the selection, and then I wouldn't say relaxed, but something a little different in the ongoing monitoring criteria. So you have that option if you want. But either way, once we've made this decision and entered all this information, we can create the investment policy statement on the right side of the page and generate that report for use with the client. All right, next area is holdings. And in the holdings section, we can really start to enter the investment lineup, review the investments in the system, and begin to manage all that information for the client or for the plan. Now, I've already entered information here, and we'll talk about how that information came in just a second. But just to kind of drive home the investment policy statement, due diligence criteria, what we can do is jump into this watch list and notes area. And what we see here is the meets IPS monitoring criteria column. So we see here with the green check and the red X, the investments that are passing or failing my criteria again, whether it's the fiduciary score or my own custom due diligence criteria. Again, either one, it's going to help drive this data point. Now, by default, if we look at this very last option, this Vanguard Wellington down here, this is passing our criteria, and it's going to be kept off the watch list. Our notes, or excuse me, our total bond market index is actually failing our criteria, so it's going to be placed on the watch list. So this is going to help drive the final watch list decision, and you may just leave it at that. It may come up with a few items on watch, but again, you're going to go and explain the process to the client. Perhaps, for example, this American Funds Capital World is actually failing, but it's actually off the watch list. So what that hopefully means to you is you actually have the final say in the watch list decision-making process. So we can click in here and override the system. We can do that on two different levels. One is a client-specific decision that you can make in the toolkit. So what this means is, again, for our 401k client that we have here, 4th Avenue Associates, since this client is holding this American Funds, we can go into the system and make a decision just for that client to keep it on or take it off the watch list. I said that backwards. Keep it on or keep it off. So we can go and do that in the system. We can also make a global decision here. So any client that holds American Funds, do we want to place it on or keep it off the watch list? And then again, the final decision is being made. So what you again have is the final say. We also can flag that investment as being replaced if we need to, just by clicking on the flag. And then we can also add notes into the system on investment by investment level. And just like the watch list decisions, we can go in here and create a note and make that note a global note. It'll apply to all clients that hold that investment. Or a client-specific note. We can maybe select just a few clients to enter a note for, or one particular client to enter the note for, and then make those notes in the system and store that information. All right, going back to the investment tab for a second, and again, that watch list area, again, a lot going on, but again, really the system is as simple or as detailed as you want it to be. If you want the IPS criteria to run the decision, maybe just a quick review of that area, and all you need to do is run the report. If you're making more investment level decisions on specific investments and you want to make some overriding decisions, you can jump in there, add notes, and make those decisions. And really that is, again, as simple or as detailed as you want it to be. We'll touch on, again, some global areas that you can use to make those decisions without jumping into each client, and we'll touch on that hopefully at the end. Getting back to investments, though, I already had my investments listed in here, but how do we enter the information? There's really a couple different ways, and it all starts over on the right side of the page. So the first option is typing in the information. So whether it's a name of an investment, it's a ticker, it's an ETF, it's a separately managed account, you can type in the name and select that investment from the drop-down, and then add that into your holdings, which I won't do now, but you can. Another option is to use a custom holdings directory. So if you have an investment that you need to enter into the system, something that we don't track, like a stable value fund or a stock or a bond, what you can do is go into the custom holdings directory, create a proxy for that investment, so a stable value fund or some custom stock, 4th Avenue company stock. We can build that into the system, add the investment information into the system for that custom holding, and then add that into our client holdings as an investment option. Another way to add data is to actually jump into the analyzer. So if you're tracking something like those GRPAs or something that you're not 100% certain of the name, you can go into the analyzer, search and find it, and then when you get to the results page, you'll have an option to add that investment to the client. Probably the most common way of adding data is to actually use an Excel spreadsheet, though. So being able to upload the Excel spreadsheet, adding the ticker and the dollar value into the spreadsheet, and then loading that as a single file into the toolkit. Easiest way to load data. It takes just a few seconds. So if you're able to get a spreadsheet out of another software application or a custodian or a record keeper and pull that data out into an Excel spreadsheet, it may take you 2 minutes to format it, and then you'll be able to load that into the toolkit. And then in an even more specific way, which we won't get into today, but just so you know it's available, up in My Clients, there's a data import option. And if you're working with a specific application like Morningstar Principia or Workstation or Schwab Portfolio Center or Money Guide Pro, all those options have an export file. You can export the client lineup and actually several client lineups out of that application and then load that into the toolkit. So you can load one single client at a time, or you can load 50 clients using that export file. And that's a really handy way to quickly load and update data if you're using those options. There's more details in that data import area if you want to check that out. So a couple different ways that you can get the data in and update the data, but once it's in, again, it's going to be stored in here. You just need to jump in and perhaps make some updates to the dollar values or to the lineup as a whole if investments get added or removed. Since we're in this 401k client, I just want to point out the model portfolios. If you have model portfolios that you use for a 401k plan, you can build them into the toolkit and add them into a client for client reporting, a really handy way to provide reporting for those model portfolios. It'll provide a whole host of details in terms of, again, just the lineup for the model, but then also all the performance reporting that you may want to see for that individual model as well. Won't go into too much detail for that, though. Now, the last section before we jump into our reports is expenses. And again, we could probably spend a whole hour, and I have spent a whole hour in this expense area, but we'll spare you the details for today. But it's really broken down in a couple different areas. And what this gives you is not only fee and expense review and disclosure abilities to load this information and produce helpful reports that will provide summary information for a client, but also you could upload and actually add to your toolkit subscription 408B2 and 404A reporting options. So if you wanted to add those components in, you can add that into the toolkit and really take advantage of all this information that's going on. Jumping in here and defining different compensation profiles to define your fees, other vendor fees, and really defining all the different fee options that are needed for review. And then going through revenue sharing, so looking at all these different components that you may need to enter and break down in terms of both the 12B1, the sub-TA, the wrap fee, and other shareholder servicing fee information. And as we look at all this data here, we can say, well, that's a lot of data to enter, but if you recall back in the custom holding area, you had when we were creating that client, we had the ability to attach a custom universe to our client. And that custom universe may include just a list of tickers for a platform, but you can also upload all this fee information detail. So 12B1 fees, sub-TA fees, front loads, back loads, redemption fees, finder's fees. A lot of this information that you need, if you can get that from the platform or the vendor, you can load that into the system, have all this information load into the toolkit, and then you'll be off and running in terms of your reporting. All right. Finally, we get to the results. And again, the IPS, the expenses, maybe you won't spend a whole lot of time in there, but jumping into the holdings just to review and update the client lineup is where you'll spend your time. This is probably the second area that you'll spend your time running the reports. And again, we'll talk about how we can save even more time by not even going into this client area at all. But custom report templates and fi360 report templates. So I'm going to run, just as an example, we'll breeze through this example, but I'm going to run a monitoring report. We'll take a quick look at that monitoring report. There's a bunch of other default reports that we can run. Again, that profile report, the snapshot report, those two items that we looked at earlier. our fee disclosure reports if you decide to purchase the upgrade version, our fee and expense report, comparison reports, due diligence breakdown reports, all these different report options. But what all these different report options really come down to are sections and really customizing your own report. So there's some funny stuff going on, but take a quick look at this one that I've highlighted down below, this short monitoring report. And what I've built here is really my own custom report that I want to provide to a certain level client or provide to clients at a certain level of the year. So maybe this is a report that I provide on a quarterly basis. Maybe I provide a more comprehensive annual report. I can build different levels of reports and store them into the toolkit for report generation for my clients. So how do I do that? If I actually edit this report or create it on the right side of the page, what I'm actually doing is making selections in terms of the different report sections. So if you look on the left side of this page here, we have all the different options, and I've actually added most of them over to the right side during my demos already. But let's say we want to add this performance summary section. So I've clicked on it, and it gives us a little preview here, which we can pull up for a closer inspection and say, hey, that's a nice report section, or I know what that report section is. I know I want to add that, so I can click on the Add section. And if we scroll down to the bottom here, we see that it's been added. But not only am I adding this to the report as I build it, but if I move it up here, I can change the order of those report sections. I can move everything around to make it just the way I want my report to look. If I open up some of these sections, oh, that doesn't help. Let's try this holding summary. If I open up some of these sections, I can change the grouping and sorting and really customize the report in the way the information is shown in the report. In addition to that, I can change the layout. I can make it a portrait or landscape report. I can change the color scheme. I can build a corporate color scheme into the toolkit that reflects my practice. I can add my logo and really build custom reports in the toolkit. And then finally, for the compliance folks, we can also add our disclosures as well to have all that information added in. So once I hit save and go back, we can generate this report just like any other report, and we'll pull it up briefly just to see some of the customizations come through in our reporting. Now let's pull up that monitoring report that I ran earlier and take a look at it. And again, I'm not going to spend a lot of time going through this. If you've been to our website and studied it, hopefully you found the sample reports, and you can take a look at those again. But this monitoring report, again, nice cover page, presents all the information for the client and for yourself and service providers. A nice table of contents to give you the review and the shakedown of what's going on. But then we get into the section. So this performance summary, that broad market summary. This is a great section that goes through each of the different asset classes and gives you just a different look at the data, gives you a sense of what's going on. But as you're looking at this section here today, keep in mind that this is a section that's available. So if you want to include this section, you can build this into your custom report. If you don't want this section, don't add it. So really, as we look at each section, this equity section is another one. If you want it, you can keep it. If not, don't add it. Really, you're building the way that you want the report to look. But a couple highlights. One is, again, just the holding summary. So again, pretty simple report in itself, but very helpful to have. We have each investment option. We have the action item on the far right side of the page, and this information can be grouped and sorted in different ways. So we grouped it by these different peer groups, but maybe you just want a straight list of investments. You can build that into the report. Style analysis. Again, this is a nice way to look at the Morningstar style box overall, and then in all its detailed glory. But as we scroll through here, there's all these different sections that are available. Last section I'm going to show is standardized performance, and this is a load-adjusted investment return section. And the reason I want to show this is for everyone that works with a broker-dealer, all of our reports have been reviewed by FINRA. If you go to our Help Center, there's material on that in the Help Center that will help you and your compliance folks with their due diligence on the reports. But again, many broker-dealers use our report, and this is just one small section that needs added. Unfortunately, you need to add this section in, but it needs added in and for review with FINRA. But as I go through again, I'm just going to scroll through and get down into the last few sections. One is this fiduciary score breakdown. So again, touching back on that holding section when we were reviewing the monitoring criteria, touching back on the investment policy statement. If you're using the fiduciary score as your due diligence process, here's the section that you show your client. Hey, these are the 11 factors that we're using. Here's the fiduciary score, and here's the check to show which items are passing and which items are failing. If you've built your own custom due diligence criteria, we have a separate section that'll show those custom factors and thresholds that you built, all the custom pieces of that due diligence criteria, and then the check and the X, which items are passing, which items are failing, again, based on the IPS that you built for that client. So really, again, tying that due diligence process from the IPS into the reports that you're showing and using for analysis and review is really what the toolkit helps you to do. And as we jump back here, we have our investment notes that you can add in, and then watch list action items. For each investment that falls on watch, here we can document the meeting either beforehand or after, and really use this as a scratch pad or again, an official way to review what's going on with each investment in the lineup. Just to look at our sample report again, just to change it up. Again, you may not notice this, but this is a landscape report now. Same first page, covers all the pertinent client information. Same investment lineup in this report, but we're jumping into a different section now. Hey, here's the comparison section that I mentioned earlier. So it jumps into the comparison section. Second page is the comparison section. Looking at that snapshot section now, looking at that performance summary section. So same section that you saw earlier, just a different format now, and really giving you the ability to change and the look and feel of the report based on what you want to show for the client. Jumping into the next section, and hopefully that kind of wraps everything up again. Hopefully we'll have a few minutes here to talk about some of the summary, but I really wanted to go through that client area because, again, that's where you'll probably spend a lot of your time. Before we wrap it up, just wanted to show you the proposal generator, and this is a great piece that not only, again, helps you to win new business, but again, with your existing clients, being able to recommend changes in their portfolio or plan. This is a great comparison report, and just to show you what's going on again, looking at this default report, we have this proposal report, and it's going to cover a lot of those same pieces that we either flew through or reviewed in the monitoring report. So holding summary, just looking at the differences between current and proposed, we have those listed here in this proposal report. Style analysis, again, current versus proposed side by side on the page for side-by-side review. And it's going to be that way, side-by-side on the page, side-by-side within a graph if we're showing performance for the portfolio, or side-by-side within a peer group to give you true side-by-side comparison of the current investment and then the proposed investment. So we can really see and get a good comparison of what's going on between the two investments. So again, a nice report to generate for those options. So how did I create that report? It's a pretty simple process to run through. I'm not going to, again, spend the time to do it, but there's really 3 steps in the process. Defining the current lineup, defining the proposed lineup, and then mapping between the two. So current and proposed. What's the current lineup look like? What's the proposed lineup look like? A couple different ways that you can load the data, but it's really simple in terms of loading the data. If you already have a client built into the system, you just click a button and load that client into the system. You have an Excel spreadsheet, and you already have that data in that. You just load that into the current lineup. There's another option that we have in areas that we didn't cover with lists and models. You can combine the list and the model together to build a lineup. And then finally, if you enjoy typing in ticker symbols, you certainly can jump in and start from scratch and do that option too. But again, current and proposed are pretty straightforward. The mapping option is optional, but again, it's a very helpful way to, again, take those current and proposed lineups and provide some meaning to the report. And what we're looking at here is not a whole lot of data, but hopefully it gives you one sense of what you can do. And again, this is in terms of mapping the differences between current and proposed. So on the left side we have the current, on the right side we have the proposed, and what we have listed here are no values. But let's play around here with a little bit. We'll put in 100,000, and we can say, oops, that doesn't help. All right, so that's the current lineup. We can jump over here and do the exact same thing and put in the proposed lineup. If you're loading the current and proposed lineup again, you won't have to type in the data. If you pull it in the client, if you upload it in an Excel spreadsheet, all this information will be pre-populated for you. But again, just looking at the differences between current and proposed in terms of dollars or percentage allocation. So that's great, but maybe you actually want to do something different with your proposal. Maybe you want to map where the funds in the current lineup are going and map them to the proposed lineup. Well, you can do that in the other option in this mapping area. And for this Alger capital appreciation, and again, just to give you some context, this is just the current lineup now. So we're just looking at the current lineup on this page. The proposed lineup is actually hidden behind this add button. So again, we have our current investment. What do we want to map that to? Well, here we have the proposed lineup. Maybe we just want to map to one single fund. We can map that one single fund, and then that will be on our way. Maybe for this next fund here, we want to map between 4 funds. We can do that. And again, in terms of the dollars and percentages, you can add that into the process, or maybe just not have any options at all. However you want to build the proposal and show that mapping. So a couple different ways to go through that process. But in the end, we get that nice proposal report that you can use in an RFP situation, where again, just helping a client understand the changes that you're recommending for reallocation or changes in the lineup. All right, we have a few more minutes, and then I do see there are a few questions, so I'll get to them here at the end. But just wanted to follow up and talk about kind of how to manage all this data globally. So we have the client area in particular, where again, you're going to spend a lot of your time, and you're in here making investment decisions. You're in here loading data. You're in here reviewing and investment information for the client. Wouldn't it be great to kind of manage all this from more of a global perspective? Well, you can. Again, being able to look at this information is a great way to manage the process. So we can go in and build some reports in this global reporting area. I can go in and do some client statistics. And if I retrieve this data and group the data by client, we can pull up some of this information and look and see what's going on across all of our clients in the toolkit. Again, mine was just a little bit restricted because I was just looking at the current period, but here we have just the current investments in the system. We can pull up and see what's going on with each individual client. We can see the current lineup, we can see what's going on, and we can get some aggregate information on what's going on with the clients in the system. Export that data and use that data in whatever way you want. Perhaps you want to look at the investments instead of on a client level, which is pretty handy, but pretty boring. Maybe you want to look and see what fund families you're using across all your clients. Well, we can jump into the system and take a look at some of that information as well. I guess jump is a relative term in terms of execution here. Apologize for the delay here. It normally comes up pretty quickly, but again, I think you get the idea of just taking a look at the data and being able to look at it across all the clients that you've built into the system. I know that as soon as I was going to say something, it came up, but I guess not. So again, being able to take a look at some of that information. How about those watch list decisions that you've been making? Well, we can go into the watch list management area. We can go to the note area and really take a look at those, again, from a global perspective, not just looking at the decisions in the notes area or the client area in particular. And you're really looking at those global decisions that we've made and perhaps making more global decisions in the toolkit without jumping into a client. So we can jump in here, pull up a fund, and add that into our process and create a watch list decision for the client. One section that I do know takes some time, so I won't bring it up today, but this watch list summary area. So again, looking at the investment decisions that are being made in terms of watch list decisions. Going into this watch list summary area, again under the settings and watch list management area, and really looking at all the watch list decisions that are being made across all the clients, helping you to kind of assimilate all that information into one single area and make some reasoning out of it. So we can see some trends. Hey, all these clients have the same investment on watch, and they're all using different criteria. Maybe it's time I take a closer look at that particular investment. Or, hey, all of my clients are using this one particular fund, and again, it's off watch. So what's going on there? So really being able to look at all those decisions across all the clients and being able to make some sense of it. Again, if you're using some of the applications listed here, like Principia, Morningstar Office, Schwab Portfolio Center, MoneyEye Pro, being able to load data into the system globally without jumping into the client area. This is a nice way to upload many clients at once using this data import option. That's a nice piece that you can kind of use globally. And this is an area that we're really starting to expand more. So stay tuned where we want to really add more features and give you the ability to provide easier ways for you to load data into the toolkit, not just by uploading Excel spreadsheets. So keep that in mind. And then last but not least, running reports. So running reports is probably another thing that you're going to spend a lot of your time doing, but you can really manage that process pretty quickly and efficiently with a batch report. So what we can do is, I'm just going to pull up our 401k batch report, but what I can do here is select from my entire list of clients. I can select the clients I want. I can select the reports I want and click Save Changes. And then once I actually execute the report, it's going to schedule in. And it may take a couple minutes. It may take an hour, depending on how busy we are, how many reports you've scheduled. But close out of the toolkit, go do something else more productive, come back in an hour, and you're going to have your reports available to you. So we'll start to see this come up a little bit here. So we start to see one report, one report. Oh, there's two reports. And we'll start to see all these reports generate. And then you'll see a zip file as well, so you can download. Maybe there's only 5 reports. Maybe there's 500 reports. You don't want to, again, pull these up individually. You want to generate all these reports and dump them onto your desktop. So you can load them into another management system, a file management system that you have. Take them off of the system and have them available to you. Well, that's it. I've run out of time. I'm going to stop blathering now. Hopefully there's a few questions I see. And I think that we're ready to answer any of those questions now. So with that being said, thank you again for attending today. Hopefully this will give you a good overview of what's going on in the toolkit and give you a good sense of what you can do moving forward. So I'm going to stop and answer these questions now, but again, if you need to jump off, I appreciate your time. Thank you and have a great day. All right, couple questions here. One way back at the beginning here, how do you change? I think this was back in the results page. The question are, how do you change the columns that are set as a default? So back in our analyzer, we had some default columns. that are set in the system. And unfortunately, there's no way to set or change the default columns. They're always going to be set as a default in here. If you wanted to select something, you'd always have to hide the one column and then add the other one in. So with that being said, that is something that we hope to add into the system in the future. But for right now, there's no way to change or reset the columns. Again, question about client information getting populated. Again, we went through the different options that we have in the holdings page to load that data. So hopefully we answered that question there. Again, in the holdings area, question about can you populate mutual funds, separate accounts, variable annuities in the holdings page all at once? Yes, you can. In my client, I only had mutual funds and a custom holding, but you can add in anything that you need to into a client holding. So if you need to add in some of those GRPAs in with a list of mutual funds, you can do that in the system. And finally, there's a question about GRPA data not current. Not quite sure what you mean, Doug, there. The GRPA data is current. We update that on the same schedule as mutual fund data, so the data is going to be current in the system. Your question about last quarter and 1 year in terms of I'm guessing in terms of the fi360 fiduciary score. So again, the data that we have in the system is always going to be current, but in terms of the fiduciary score that you may see for a GRPA, if you're looking at those averages, keep in mind that the average is based on the history that we've calculated in the toolkit. So again, we can only go back so far based on the history that we have. And in particular with those GRPAs, you may see an inception date for a particular GRPA that goes back 10 years or so. However, Morningstar just started tracking and calculating data that we could pull into the toolkit probably about 2 years ago. So right now, you're really only going to see a current fiduciary score and the 1 year average. And again, that's not based on the history of the investment, that's just based on the data set. So we only have enough history in the system to calculate those 2 data points right now. But as we start to build that out, it's always going to be based on that information. So again, Doug, I think, was looking at the average again. If you're looking at those GRPAs, you may want to change the fiduciary score that you're looking at because again, you're not going to get a 3, 5, or 10-year average. So that's probably the best way to handle that option. Question about individual VA investments available inside. Yeah. So question about the individual investments inside the VA. So we do track this up, and that is going to be again the individual sub account. There's probably about 110,000 investments that we track in here. So in this analyzer in the VA data set here, if we're pulling up a particular insurance company, which is probably the best way to start out, let's just pull up Allstate, I guess. We add that over. Oh, there it goes. We add over Allstate. There's about 1,400 investments. If we scroll down and look in this contract and policy name, we can narrow this list down even further to a particular policy. So let's just take enhanced choice, for example, and add that over. So now we're down to 13. And again, this may be a terrific example. It may be horrible, but I just clicked a few things to pull this in. And these 13 investments are the underlying sub-accounts for this particular policy. So as we look here, we have these Van Kampen funds, and VI. I'm not quite sure what that is, but these are the underlying individual investments for this VA and for this policy. All right, well, that about wraps it up. I don't see any other questions now. So again, if you do have any other questions, check out our Help Center. It's always a click away up in the upper right-hand corner. Or feel free to shoot us an email, tools@fi360.com. Give us a call, and we'll help you out as best we can. Thank you, everyone. Have a great day.